Hello, good morning, and welcome to Step Up Nigeria's podcast. Our podcast is an initiative built to create awareness of governance issues that highlight the cost of corruption and its impact on service delivery. On our podcast today, our topic is vaccinating children against corruption. Is storytelling an effective vaccine to prevent corruption? We'll be answering that question and more in this podcast. To discuss this podcast with me this morning, I have my executive director in the person of Ms. Onyi Ough. And Onyi is the director for Step Up Nigeria's monitoring and evaluation in terms of providing the accurate results from the work that we're doing. And Step Up Nigeria carried out an impact evaluation trial using a randomized control trial method. And we'll be discussing a bit more about that through the course of this podcast. So I would like to start by asking Onyi to explain to us, what do you mean by vaccinating children against corruption?
Yeah, thank you so much, Farami. So for vaccinating children against corruption, literally, I would call it, using what I call the C approach, which is one, showing children the cost of corruption and benefits of integrity through stories, educating children on anti-corruption values, so such as like transparency, accountability, integrity. They need to be fair, they need to be honest, and then empowering children to promote integrity and act against corruption. So for me, these three elements together, it's a it's a way of vaccinating children for the future, against corruption in the future.
Thank you very much, Onyi. So next, we'd like to know, South Nigeria carried out a randomized impact evaluation trial in the first quarter of the year 2021, and that was done to test the effectiveness of storytelling in preventing corrupt behaviors in children or in influencing them to act with integrity. So can you tell us a bit about why, you chose storytelling, why use storytelling in preventing corrupt behaviors?
Yeah, thank you, Farami. So, Step Up Nigeria, one of the reasons why Step Up Nigeria was set up in the first place was really to begin to tackle some of these social norms that drive or enable corrupt behaviors. And one of the ways that we've been experimenting to see as an approach to tackle this, challenging problem is to use storytelling. And the reason why we've chosen storytelling is because everybody likes stories, right? And for me, I think storytelling simplifies messages. So it takes something complex, and simplifies it in a fun way. So we're using storytelling to simplify the messaging around corruption. We don't want it to be a boring topic for the children or something too difficult for them to understand. So we have to break the meaning of corruption by using stories. Using stories to explain that concept of corruption is cost to society. Why it is bad and that sort of thing, and how they can take action. And we also use storytelling as well because we feel it's a fun way to educate children again. Around anti-corruption values. And the need to act with integrity. And we hope that also stories, we use storytelling to be able to inspire action because, as you know, stories have, characters in them. And so it's to begin to create those trendsetters, from the stories that children can look up to, and that may inspire them to act, against corruption and promote integrity.
Thank you very much, Oni, for that response. And I think storytelling is quite interesting for all the reasons that you've given to catch the interest of young people. So would like to know, for this experiment that was carried out, who was the target for this evaluation?
Yeah, thank you. So the targets were school children aged 10 to 15 years in junior secondary school 2 and junior secondary school 3, so what we call JS2 and 3. And the total number of children that we targeted were 1,185 across Lagos, Abuja, and Kaduna, and across 38 schools as well. And so, we had two different things. Two different types of storytelling tools we tested. So we tested the films and books. So for the films, we had 22 schools, and for the books, we had 16 schools.
Okay, thank you. What states did you carry this out in?
Lagos, then the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, and then Kaduna.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, ma'am. So can you tell us a bit more about the randomization process and the intervention itself?
Okay, so let me start with the randomization process. So we really did the simple randomization process where we had equal number of control group and equal number of treatment groups. Control group are those that don't receive the intervention that we want to give, and the treatment groups are those that actually receive the intervention. And the randomization was done at the individual level, but before then, we had to randomize at the school level. So where schools that were interested to participate, first of all, we did some kind of expression of interest, where we try to get schools' interest to participate, to them what we're doing. And then once schools indicated their interest to participate, we randomize schools. And then after randomizing schools, the classes we're targeting, which is the junior secondary school 2 and junior secondary school 3, that's JS2 and 3, we also randomize those classes before the actual day of the trial. Then on the day of the trial, we randomize at the child level. So we randomize the students, on the day of the trial. So meaning that nobody knew at any point until the day of trial, including us in Step Up Nigeria, who was going to be in the intervention group or who was going to be in the control group. So that's the whole idea of the randomization. So nobody knows, nobody until the day that we're actually conducting the trial. And we also use the phase design approach, where those in the control group receive this treatment afterwards. So even though they didn't receive it during the trial, but afterwards they still ended up benefiting from what was given to the intervention. And the whole idea around this was to do no harm policy that we have, because we also have some ethical principles that we had to follow while conducting this trial. And of course, the randomization itself during the at the class level, where we're randomizing at the student level, was done verbally with children taking turns, either saying the name of colors or cartoon characters. And in some instances, we also use ballot papers as well. And then you asked about the intervention, right? So yes. The intervention, so like what we're trying to test is the effectiveness of storytelling, right? In influencing children to act with integrity. And Step Up Nigeria uses a range of storytelling tools. So we use films, animated films, and we use books, we use comics. But for this trial, we wanted to test, use the film to see to what extent, people who watched the film without any kind of teaching, just watching the film alone, the anti-corruption film we had, we're going to act with integrity. And then the anti-corruption animated film we used for the purpose of this trial was Emeka's Money. And then we also did like a different second intervention, storytelling intervention we used was what we call participatory book reading, which is also another storytelling intervention Step Up Nigeria uses, where we read along with the children, and in the process of reading, we also try to tease out the key lessons learned. So we do a little bit more teaching and engagement than with the film, where they just watch the film, is whatever the message from the film gives. So those were the two interventions we did. So, and we didn't do them concurrently. We had a set of trials that just looked at the impact of the film, and the second intervention, and a set of trials that just look at the impact of the books on children's behavior.
Thank you very much for that overview, Onyi. So next, we would like to know what measures did you use? Like, what did you use to measure this intervention? And what were some of the outcomes that you're expecting from these storytelling interventions?
Yeah, thanks, Parami. So for the expected outcomes, one of the things we wanted to find out were, first of all, the first thing we wanted to find out was to what extent our storytelling tools increase the knowledge and attitudes, increase knowledge of corruption, as well as would lead to a positive change in attitudes towards corruption among the targeted children. And then the more importantly, what we're really trying to find out was also to see to what extent children were going to demonstrate strong anti-corruption values, or positive behaviors, either acting with integrity after taking part in either the participatory book reading session or the film. And so to measure that, we had to be a bit creative, because, at the end of the day, these are children and they haven't been exposed to much, let me not say that I'm exposed. Some children are really quite exposed to, corruption issues. Actually, that it impacts some children, but not all of them would have experienced. We didn't want to do harm or expose them to something because it's a trial, and particularly those in the control group, we're not necessarily going to be told anything right or wrong till after the trial. So we need to be careful in how we designed the interventions. We have to think about what children experienced that was close to kind of a corrupt behavior, if you know what I mean. And we thought about cheating, and then we tried to create a corruption scenario as well around that cheating, but I'll come to that. So what we tried to measure was to what extent, if people watch the film, we're going to cheat for themselves. So cheat for others, or whether we're going to cheat at all, whether there'll be any evidence of cheating. So we're measuring cheating for yourself, cheating for others, or no evidence of cheating. And, as a measurement tool to see if people, after watching the film, we're acting with integrity.
Thank you. So I wanted to also ask, in terms of like getting consent from, the children and the parents in schools, if you can just talk a bit about getting that, made that possible.
Yes, sorry, what did you mean in terms of
Consent? How were you able to get children and schools to
Oh,
consent?
yes, exactly. So definitely, so we had to first of all sign before we do, as part of the process, during the planning process. When we go to schools, we have to give them a consent form which they give to the children's parents. So there was consent at the school level, there was consent at the parent level, and even the child. We did not force any child to participate, even if the school and the parents have said, oh, it's fine for them to participate. If children did not feel like doing that on the day, because at the end of the day they're children and we have to ensure that we do no harm, we just excluded them from the session.
Thank you very much, Onyi. So how did you test for cheating?
Yes, so like I said, what we did was, first of all, as you know, we randomized them at the beginning, so they were divided into control and treatment groups, and then so we had like a maths and English, test competition, and we told them, that, look, we're going to have this, this competition, and if you do very well, you're going to get high, some, wonderful, so nice gifts, or there was going to be a high reward. So we gave them very tough maths and English questions, but with with a promise to get, you know wonderful presents, of exciting presents at the end, which motivated the children. So the children were quite eager because of, in taking part in the test, because they wanted to get those to get the reward. And so for the maths test, I think we tested for people were given to, what we did was to first of all, what we did was to give them, like I said, we created a corruption scenario, and we created a situation where we wanted to say, if with the children were given the power to self-mark their scripts, would they do the right thing? So we give them the answer sheets, and so we give them the power to mark their scripts. And what we're trying to create here was, a bit of even a corruption scenario, in the sense that we know corruption happens, when people kind of have the power sometimes, to do that. Is they have that power, they have the authority, and they also have the discretion, and they also have access to resources, so in this case, we wanted to see to what extent the children, put them in that, by giving them the answer sheets, and giving them everything they need at their disposal, with no one watching them, where they're going to, so they have the power to self-mark their scripts. And so it was at their discretion to either mark their scripts, with integrity, or choose to alter their scores, exactly. So that's how we try to test, and we also give them blue pens to write and the black pens for marking, to be able to enable us to determine when cheating would have occurred or not occurred. And then we also try to look out for anybody who altered the scores or marked wrong answers right. So that was how we, tested for cheating. And it was quite interesting, actually, to see still, like, even, like the children's, behavior from that process.
Yeah, thank you very much, Onyi. Just as you're running through the process again, I think, as someone who was part of the implementation team in schools, even just the idea of changing pens, I think in thinking through the whole experiment, children actually found those little things fun and exciting, just changing color and the
Yes.
matching process. So just to, it wasn't such a serious process. Children actually
Yes.
found even the challenge of answering the
Mm.
question and trying to finish first and getting them actually quite exciting.
Mm.
So what were the key findings and results from this process?
So one of the key things we found are that the storytelling interventions, at least using films and books, reduced cheating behaviors by 20% and 21% compared to the control group. That was really, glaring. And both we saw that both the film screening and participatory book reading sessions brought down cheating. Both of them brought down cheating, compared to the control group, like I mentioned earlier. And 59 out of every 100 people, from what we saw, are likely not to cheat after watching the film, while 50 out of 100 people who read the books, the anti-corruption storybooks, were less likely, to cheat. I From this, what we found was that the film seemed to have a bit more impact as well, on motivating people to act. And we also generally as well, we found that those in the treatment group, demonstrated a stronger understanding of corruption, obviously, because, they watched an anti-corruption film and they read an anti-corruption storybook. So I guess that was why there was that strong understanding of corruption. And we saw as well an increased motivation by students who watched the film, particularly the film. I mean, both of them, there were motivation, but with the film, we saw more motivation by students, who watched the film to tackle corruption. And I found that quite interesting because we didn't really, just the film told the story, the film did the teaching, and tells you the power of films, really. And then what was interesting is after 3 to 4 months, we went back. We still tried to finalize this result, but preliminary findings, we did like what we call the endline RCT, where we repeated the same process like I had mentioned earlier. The only thing we did was to just change the maths and question, because we're dealing with the same group of people, so we changed the maths and English questions slightly, still tough questions, and we saw that it was reduction in cheating behaviors by 16%. So you can see that there was a bit of there was a bit of a downward slope. And that was also an interesting find, meaning that does this mean that, for storytelling to be effective, like over a long period of time, do we need to sustain, that intervention, or do we? For me, what it showed me was just like definitely one-off interventions cannot work when it comes to, changing behavior and corruption education.
Thank you very much. So it sounds like a process that might have a bit of complication in terms of following the steps. So I'd like to know, were there any challenges that were faced in the process of running this RCT, or any lessons learned that will impact future RCTs?
Yeah, so some of the challenges faced were like I think some schools were being a bit skeptical, of basically when you're going to give their children tests, they were a bit worried, like, because, schools don't want to um, come out like looking like they're not, academically sound, or their kids are not, don't, are not academically sound. So, or, so there was this, they wanted to be like the school with high grades, so they were a bit worried about, this test and assessment. And I think some of them were also we're trying to convince school that it was not an assessment of whether their students cheat. So there was this thing of whether it made, their students look, like people who were dishonest, and they were not doing a good job in, in having a school with students who act with integrity. So I think there was already that thing. So they didn't really want a bad name, and we tried to. So what we did was to try to convince them that this was not really, about the school. This was just for us to improve our methods, our storytelling intervention, and to really understand if it's working or not working when it comes to influencing children to act with integrity. And you were also in the field, but I know some of the field researchers, the people who carried out this in the classroom, some of those staff mentioned teachers working in and out of the classroom. So you were there, I'm sure you would have experienced that. So there were cases of teachers working out of class, which was a bit distracting for the students. Some students in the control group also felt left out. That was also reported by field observers like you, who were there during the process, and I could relate with that. That's something we really tried, not to happen, but luckily it was just one school, just few schools, that happened. So because what we did was the control group, what I didn't mention earlier, was why the intervention groups watched the film or read the books. Those in the control group, we just engaged them on what they felt about COVID-19. So I think they felt heated having people in the other class watching this exciting movie, and they're just discussing COVID-19. And I'll come to what we're trying to do to change that and soon. But also some schools also experienced power outages, which just delayed the sessions and made some of the sessions, we had to rush, compared to what we would have wanted to do, if we had, electricity supply, like we had electricity. And also for the end line RCTs, one of the things we found was also a dropout rate, and either students were not in school that day, or so we didn't have all the students who participated in the initial RCT, participated during the end line RCT. Now, you mentioned lessons learned. So lessons learned in terms of the RCT itself, set of the process. I'll say that one of the things I think we'll do better next time when we are conducting the RCTs next year, or the randomized impact evaluation, is really ensuring that we take time to explain to the students in the control group before it starts that, they would eventually also watch this film in a couple of, but for now, these people are watching this film or doing this, and that they will all get what this other class is getting. because so that they don't feel. So we tell them that the next time we come, they would have the intervention while the treatment group will be doing what they're doing at the moment. So it's just because we can't have everybody in the same room. So we try to explain that to the students. And they would also we'll try to see to what extent we can make the intervention a little bit similar, but still capture. So for example, if we did an anti-corruption animated film, where they watch Emeka's money. So maybe we'll look for a random film that is not anti-corruption related, that doesn't have anything around anti-corruption values. It's just like just a fun film with none of those messaging. Just a fun film for the kids, and maybe that way that people would not feel left out. So we'd explore that option. The same thing with those in the book reading as well. Also, like I mentioned earlier, anti-corruption films appeared more impactful in motivating children compared to the participatory book reading, which I still find quite intriguing, but we're going to do more tests to see whether this is still the case. But we'd love to see if in future RCTs, where we have the same group of people watch the film, also read the book, so rather than have one session, maybe we'd explore based on budget, availability of our budget. We'll see what our budget can allow us to do. But what I want us to do early next year is to actually have rather than have one intervention, have two interventions concurrently with the same group. So the first session will be to watch the film, maybe the next session will be to read a different book, but that's anti-corruption related. And then we see to what extent, having those two doses, of the storytelling intervention, would lead to more, increase the number of children who are acting with integrity, as opposed to when they just have single dose of interventions. So this is something that we're going to explore, from the lessons that we've learned from the last RCT.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Onyi. That was quite clear and quite interesting, like you said. Again, from the field, challenges, I think you captured the challenges accurately. Another challenge I think we faced, which you've already said we'll work harder to, is sort of communicating. Sometimes I suspect that some children, really did not explain to their parents what they were doing. They just said, fill this form, fill this, and some parents who actually didn't even read, because the concept form that we shared to parents actually outlined the process step by step. It was quite clear, so that parents knew what their children were engaging in. But I do suspect that some parents didn't read through. So I think one thing we can do going forward is get the schools to send, they have like WhatsApp platforms or those kind of, and ensure that the school gives a clear directive to all the parents on the group chat. Oh, your kids are coming home with this consent form. Please give them access, so that parents, don't just rely on whatever the children tell them as well. So I think that would be something to work. So finally, I would like to know, so from your findings, would you then say that storytelling is an effective vaccine to prevent corruption?
I would say that's interesting question for me. But I'll say storytelling has a strong potential. I want to use that word. It has a strong potential to improve the knowledge and attitudes, of children. When it comes to corruption issues, I think it has a strong potential to influence the behavior of children to act with integrity. And I think because it also storytelling helps to increase that understanding of corruption, it may also be helpful to motivating children, to act with integrity. And so I think that definitely, it has that potential. But what I found as well is that the storytelling seems to has more impact in building personal integrity. Now, it may be too early to conclude. Maybe more randomized impact trials will really tell us if this is the case. But I currently, where I stand, what I see that is more impactful in building personal integrity than in addressing some of those social pressures, which is around people wanting to help their friends or families, and that's so in order not to be ostracized. I'll be interested to see to what extent that can actually help that, and that area of targeting those social norms that enable corruption in Nigeria, at least. And then for storytelling interventions to effectively address those social norms, I'm thinking as well that, a sustained intervention may really be needed. The message may need to be, go on for a long time for it to sink in and for people to be able to take that risk to sacrifice their friendships or family, over, prioritize integrity over, like pleasing their family or friends, at the expense of the for public good. So it's that sort of thing that I think the storytelling could have a potential to do.
Yeah, thank you very much, Onyi, and thank you all for listening. If any of our listeners has any questions around the impact evaluation trial, Please do comment in the chat, comment in our website, share your comment with us on social media after you listen. We'll be very glad to answer your questions. And to do that on our social media platforms, please visit us at step_up_Nigeria at Twitter and Instagram, and Step Up Nigeria on LinkedIn and Facebook. Our website remains stepupnigeria.org. On any of those platforms, please reach out to us. We do hope that you enjoy this podcast. And we thank Mrs. Ough for joining us and the briefing on the findings from this impact evaluation trial. Thank you.
Thank you, Farami.